Don't tell me how to raise my kids. I'm still trying to raise yours. What's up, guys? My name's Jeff. That's Mike. We are My Wife Still Likes Me. How you doing, Mike?
I'm all right, man. It's been a while.
It has been a while.
It's
We
good to
took
be back here.
a month off?
Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah, just over.
All right.
I'm ready.
We're going to roll the intro, and then we'll come back.
Right on.
Clearly, we're out of practice. Hey, how you doing?
Oh, it's going to be fun.
I don't even know if it sounds good or not. I should probably listen to it. I think I should.
You remember that show? Are we recording?
Yeah. I don't know where to put stuff like this. Like, this is great stuff. All right. What is going on, guys? Today, we're talking about in-laws, right? They can be horrible, horrible, horrible people. But are they really horrible, horrible, horrible people?
No.
I don't think they are. In-laws can be incredibly wedgeful. Is that a word? They can drive a wedge between
That
a
makes
couple,
sense.
right? Vengeful is what I thought about when I think of in-laws. They can be points of tension in a relationship. Some divorces, separations, things like that can be done as a result of in-laws. It's been the stories that we hear about in-laws. I don't have that kind of relationship. I'll let you go first while I pick the questions real quick.
Oh, okay.
And we'll go there. So
Yeah, absolutely. I know. Not that my in-laws are bad. By no means. I love my mother-in-law. I love my father-in-law. In the beginning, it was more of a rocky situation, being that we were young when we got married. And obviously my in-laws wanted the best for their daughter, like we would want for our children. They would want the best. And there comes a point to where it was what they feel is best, which actually may have been best, was not what I thought was best. But to be able to sit there and interject regularly, sometimes
Sure.
I would take offense to that. And I wanted to learn. I wanted to experience the marriage. Sometimes it was very rough, but sometimes it was very good because we learned.
yeah.
So
And that makes sense. So one of the things I think with Kim and I learning marriage was that we weren't in Arizona where either of our parents were. So there were no in-laws to like stop by and intervene in
right.
disgruntledness. I don't know. I don't have a traditional in-law relationship. I mean, my in-laws are wonderful people. I've gone to their house without my wife just because, like, there have been some times that, like, I have a key to their house and I'll be doing something with the kids and their house is closer. I'm like, can we come to your house, go to the bathroom?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But before kids, like when we first moved back here, we lived with them. They took us in so we could get back on our feet after some stuff, and we came back to Arizona. We do things together. We live together sometimes. So I don't have the tension, evil, if you will, of in-laws trying to meddle in their kids' lives.
Right.
And if you're an in-law or a parent, stop. We'll talk about some of that later, but let's do uncommon questions because I forgot. So I'm legit, like, I'm not even going to read them. Like, we're going to do them at random. So you pick one and tell me.
Can we reach? There we go.
Yeah. All right.
Do I get to read it?
Yeah, you can read it. Go for it.
Oh, wait a minute. It's uncommon questions to me or you?
You can read it to me.
I'll read it to you.
Can we do this one in the show?
I think we may have done this one before.
Oh.
But I'll read it to you. It says, what is a story you never get tired of hearing your significant other tell?
I think we did do that one. Do we need to start the show over? Did I pick from the wrong side?
Pick from the wrong side. We should have an in-law here telling us, that we should have picked from the other side.
Oh, my goodness.
It's okay. We're good. We got this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we did pick from the wrong side. Whatever. All right.
That's all right.
First card, right off the other side.
Boom.
Nope.
Can't read that one.
No, we've done that one. What
Oh, okay.
opinion of yours do you hide from people? Political ones. Oh, all right. Right off the top, what is a scam that you have fallen for?
It was a scam that I have fallen for. Goodness, I have to think about that one. I always thought I was pretty
Listening to your
smart.
in-laws.
Never. Mom, if you're watching, I love your advice. Scam? Are we talking just in life in general, or?
Yeah.
Um, so I got laid off from AT&T a long time ago, where I was working at one time, and a guy I'd met up with had told me that he could get me in on Intel and stuff like that. And we drove around. I followed him for, I don't know, a couple weeks, thinking I got this in at Intel, and all the time he was just trying to get info on me, on friends and stuff like that, and ended up taking advantage of people because of that. Obviously, I didn't have a job at Intel, but that was one of the scams that I had fallen for.
Rough. I really don't know how to, like, the first joke answer that I said is I listen to my recruiter.
Oh.
But no, I loved my military career. Scam that I've fallen for. I don't know. Like, I can't think of one. Like, I'm super, like, skeptical about, like, even answering the phone.
Yeah.
Like, I had a phone call today. It was you're scheduled for a power interruption in the next 30 to 45 minutes if you don't pay your bill. Like, nothing about APS, nothing like,
Right.
this is the company. You need to press 1 to speak to our billing department. I'm like, nope. Oh, yeah, I do have one.
There it is.
I saw an ad for a craft cabinet, like 6 feet tall, that opens up, has the table inside of it, and it was like a third the normal price of anyone I'd ever seen. So I ordered it, and a month went by, I'd forgot about it, and like it wasn't delivered. And this is like pre-pandemic, like shipping being delayed because of COVID and all that stuff. And like never saw this thing, and like emailed the shipper, and the shipper's like, "Oh, it says it was delivered." And I'm like, I never got anything. And like basically their response was, the United States Postal Service says that the shipping numbers that I got were delivered. And like I have the same tracking numbers, and the tracking numbers they gave me were delivered not anywhere even close to Arizona. One was in Michigan and one was in Florida. Like, anyway, so I was out.
They didn't lie. They were delivered.
Yeah, they were delivered. They weren't delivered to me. And so
Oh
yeah.
my goodness, yeah, that's
I've been
horrible.
super grumpy about that for a while. Anyway, in-laws. I don't have a traditional relationship with my in-laws. You have similar story that we love our in-laws.
Absolutely.
But the stories we hear from people all the time are that, my mother-in-law's trying to run my marriage. My mother-in-law's telling my wife that I'm no good for her. My mother-in-law's telling me this. And it can be a pain in the butt. We can't say PETA, but we can say Pete B. I don't know. Anyway, like, I get it. And it's super difficult, especially, like, the joke is you want to live far enough away from your in-laws that they can't visit all the time, but close enough that they can go home when they do.
Right.
I don't have that problem.
No.
And even, like, my parents, like, if we got my wife out of work right now, she'd come down and tell you the same thing. Like, my parents are wonderful people. I think they're wonderful people. My wife also thinks they're wonderful people. We hang out. We try to go see them as often as possible, but they live a long way away.
Right.
But in-laws, if not addressed, can become reasons for separation. They are certainly reasons for a lot of tension. And at the end of the day, sometimes we don't want to put up with our in-laws, so we leave. Or just the all of the communication and all the things we talked about in season 1 just kind of get thrown out the window because we're just dealing with how my spouse's mom or dad thinks our relationship should be. And that's difficult. What do you think about that?
Well, I can sit there and when we got married, again, we got married young. We didn't have a place to live when we got married. We lived with my mother. And I know from the beginning of our marriage, I sat there and was, well, Mom doesn't cook like this. You know, and that was rough on my wife, and it was. Now I'm comparing her to my mom, and so that I built the wedge there between the two of them, and I was pushing the buttons that would cause strife in the marriage, just not intentionally, but there it was. And then when we moved out, we were renting my mother-in-law and father-in-law's home for a little bit when they bought their home,
Sure.
and we had our own home, and it was great. We had they would come over. We weren't too far from my mom. She would come over. We could see her. My in-laws would come over, and it was good. And then when they sold that house, we moved in with them again. We moved in with my in-laws, and living together is really really rough.
Oh, yeah.
Their habits are not my habits, and habits clash. When we did move out again and we had our own place, again, it was a better environment for the marriage. But I could see that at times, you know, with the kids and things like that, I was working an opposite shift of my wife, so she needed help. And my mother-in-law felt that I should be there at that time. And my wife wanted that. My wife, and rightfully so, but we were doing what was right for the marriage at the time. And it caused problems. I don't want to say problems, it caused friction.
Sure.
And, you know, eventually it was kind of, okay, this is what we have to do. Let's get on with it. And there for the longest time, I wouldn't call my in-laws mom or dad. And it was, you know, Phyllis and Lee. And it literally, my wife was actually out visiting her mom this week, back east, and we would FaceTime or whatever, message video, and I was calling her mom. She's my mom too. And we've been married going on 29 years now. And it wasn't always mom.
Sure.
But I'm glad it is now.
Yeah.
And she understands me now. She sees me how I am now, not as how I used to be. And then the forgiveness and everything that comes along with that is amazing from my mother-in-law. My father-in-law has passed away. I had a really good relationship with him. We both loved to tinker with things, with electronics. And I would go over to the house and literally walk in, hey, how you doing? And walk right out to the garage where he was at working.
Cool.
And we would tinker with things, and it was awesome. But he rode motorcycles. I rode motorcycles. It was one of those things. When I got my first motorcycle, I wanted to show him. But yeah, and we did. My father-in-law, we actually worked together at one point. We actually rode together to work. And it was fun. I enjoyed it. But again, nothing against my mother-in-law. She's a great woman, and she loves her kids to death, and she wants the best for her kids and the grandkids. So,
Pause.
insert commercial.
So that would have been like 12 minutes. Yeah. Anyway.
So yeah, with that, we can look at our in-laws as being, you know, problemsome, or if we can look at it from a different perspective to where they love their children.
Yeah.
You know, and they want the best. And if we can understand that, it's not as it won't be as problematic, in my opinion.
Sure. And that's one of the things we had talked about is when there are issues, and things that we're going to talk about in episode 2 and 3 of this season is boundaries for both the couple and boundaries to make with the in-laws or the parents.
Right.
But that when we have issues, or we think that, you know, our in-laws are just like full of baloney, like that's not how that is. Think about it from their perspective. Like, they still want what's best for their son or daughter.
Right.
It may not be the best decision, but most of the time, if we get, and this is the Jeff translation of life, if we get down to the root issue of why we think our in-laws are toxic, some just are. Some just have no regard for the relationship and just don't care. They think that life needs to be this way because that's the way they've always done it. But a lot of the in-laws that I talk to, there's no ill will behind it. It's they want what's best for their kid, and they don't know any better. Not in a bad way, but like their marriage may not have been the best. They didn't have our show to watch, or they didn't have a counselor or any of that stuff to be able to help them walk through this stuff. Or they grew up in the 50s or the 60s, right? Or the 70s in my parents' case. And like life was different then. Like car seats like were here. Try not to fall over. Versus, today they're like the Michelin man sitting in the back seat of the car.
Right.
So like marriage is different today. I mean, some of the core fundamentals are the same, but do we look at it from their perspective? They mean well. There are some that are just evil, for lack of a better way to put it. A general term, but look at it from their perspective. They want what's best for their little boy or little girl, whether they're 22 or 52. It's still their little kid.
Definitely.
When my mom and I talk, we're very candid, and she's like, "You're being a dummy. Figure it out." Now, I may not think I'm being a dummy, but I can look at it from her perspective. But there are some things like, and we'll talk about this more in the next couple of episodes. We left our families, like the families we grew up with, to make a new family. Some of the things that we get from our in-laws, both sides, from our parents and our in-laws, are good, awesome things that we can use in our marriages, and some are not. The issue that I think a lot of times, and we'll talk about this in more boundary stuff, is we don't defend our spouses to our in-laws. Or in-laws, to our parents. If you need to defend your spouse to their parents, that's maybe you do. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe they know something we don't.
Yeah, but that's one of those, like, that's one of the big things that we'll get into is like the boundaries. Like, but I think a lot of times our in-laws mean well. Our parents mean well. They want what's best for us. They don't maybe not know every single thing about what's going on with the kids, but or the parents, or the relationship and stuff like that. And frankly, your in-laws shouldn't know any of that stuff because you shouldn't be telling them. One of the coolest things that both my dad told me this when we got married was that he's not here to tell me how to run my relationship. He's not going to tell me how to run my relationship. If I have questions and I want to ask him, I can, and he will tell me what he thinks. But there's no requirement on that advice to follow it. And there's no requirement to, and I ask him all the time, like, hey, what do you do when this happens? Or, hey, I'm having issues with my kid doing this. And he's like, here's what I think. I've not always followed it, but it's been just good stuff. My mother-in-law has said the same thing to both of us. We're here. You need us for more than babysitting. Don't call us just for that. But if you need stuff or you need to figure it out, let us know. We'll figure it out. But they're not here to tell us how to run our relationships. And I don't think that's any in-law's job. I think advice from in-laws should be asked for. Now that may be super arrogant, and I'm sorry, but that's the way I think. It's, couples need to figure it out the hard way, but in a good way, in the hard way. Like, if there's never an excuse for physical abuse. Never. Like, if they're being emotionally abusive or there's threat of life in the process, absolutely step in. Like, come on, let's have common sense. But if they're like trying to figure out which way's up with their finances, let them figure it out. And if they come to you for help, then the door is open. Have at it. That's the other thing. No, if you go to your in-laws for advice, you have opened the door. They may be mad at you later for not following it. But thinking through in-laws, they raised our spouse.
Yes.
Arguably,
most
you
the
could
time.
say the problems that you have with your spouse are probably bred in from your in-laws, which would explain some of the tension. They probably love your kids as much as you do, if not more. And in most cases, they really just want to help.
I agree. Absolutely, 100%.
Not everybody listening to our show is going to agree with that.
And every situation is going to be different.
And it's like, don't take I'm in some dad groups, and like there are just horrible stories of my mom-in-law did this, this, and this, and she's constantly nagging me and telling me I'm no good. we'll talk about having that conversation, but there's a conversation to be had there. Like, hey, your critical opinion of me or negative opinion of me is not helpful to us actually staying married. And maybe they just need to hear that. It could happen. I don't know. What do you think?
I think you're on the right track. I think there's always going to be a point where our in-laws want the best. They mean the best. In the rare occasions they don't, there's those things. And as we do progress and we have a relationship with our spouses, we need to understand, one, they're part of our lives. They're part of our family now. And as family members, we don't always agree. And situations come up, and if we don't act on it properly, we can make it worse. So with our in-laws, speaking from personal experience, I would, if my wife asked me, hey, let's go over to my mom's house or my mom and dad's house, and I didn't want to, I'd be sure, okay, and then I would drag my feet because I really didn't want to. And 2 hours would go by. Are you ready yet? No, I'm not. One more thing. And instead of just coming out and saying, hey, why don't you go ahead and go over there? I really don't feel like going over there. And everything would have been great. But now she's expecting me to go. I don't really want to go. And by the time we get there, what she wanted to do, they can't do. So that causes, and that's me. But it's a learning aspect. But then, why are you late? Why weren't you here? Well, Mike did this, or, and now we're getting into a whole different conversation that we can talk about in a couple episodes to come up, is about what to tell your in-laws and what not to tell your in-laws.
I tell them. I don't care.
Yeah, we understand, but if that's all they hear, if that's all the in-laws hear, it has to be within reason. I messed up. I get
yes,
that.
But I'm like, you really want to know why I'm late?
Yeah, we can go into different details, but that's the thing for me. I sit there and looking back at my marriage for these many years, to be able to sit there and go, a lot of the strife was caused by me, because I had a bad idea of what in-laws would be like.
Right, and that's part of what I hope we change with these next couple of episodes. Is like the stigma of in-laws is awful, that they're just horrible people, and they're not. 99, like, we got to have the disclaimer, there are some just toxic in-laws that they just want to meddle in everything, but the vast majority of in-laws and the stories that I hear are really just parents who care but don't have boundaries.
Right.
And so that's going to take us into next week's episode. We've kind of addressed not all in-law relationships are toxic. The next couple of episodes, we're going to talk about how to deal with in-laws, both as a couple and then with the in-laws. And we'll have some specific examples, some specific questions. But for this week, the challenge would be look at whatever the issue is from their perspective, their perspective as the parent of your spouse, the parent of you to an extent. Like, they're not your biological parents, but they're still like mom and dad. And they have life experiences that you haven't experienced yet. Those are all things we can take into consideration. We'll talk about it next week. Absolutely. So remember, we are not mental health professionals. If you need mental health profession, counseling, good grief. We talk for a living. If you need mental help, please get some. There are plenty of places to go find it. We are not it. Like us on the socials. My Wife Still Likes Me. mywifestilllikesme.com. You can read a version of this eventually. And leave us comments, hit likes, and share always. We will see you next week. Peace.